Jeez Louise, KD cannot catch a break, bro. It never works out for the brother, no matter where he goes. First and foremost, I do want to say this. Shout out to Kevin Durant, 30,000 points, joining a very, very exclusive club. I think he's the 8th player of all time to do so. But outside of that, Kevin Durant has had a really, really long week. So for those who are unaware, quick recap. About a week and a half ago, we had the trade deadline where, of course, a bunch of players are moved around. Of course, the biggest headline is the Lakers receiving their future star in Luka Doncic because no one knew that Luka was even available in the first place. So that right there blew a lot of people's minds. However, even though in the transaction where you move a 25-year-old superstar and you only receive one draft pick in return, you would assume that the Mavericks were the biggest losers. However, in my opinion, it was the Phoenix Suns. By far, not even close. So far this season, Phoenix has been a definition of underwhelming. They find themselves outside of the play-in picture, which is crazy. People thought this team was going to make the playoffs, including myself, and even potentially surprise a couple of teams. But for them to be out of the play-in is something that I don't think anybody really saw. To make matters worse, is going to continue to get worse for them as the year progresses because they do have the toughest schedule left in the NBA. It actually blows my mind away what they have to endure in the next month and a half of basketball. So in the beginning of March, they go up against the Timberwolves, then Clippers, Nuggets, Mavericks, Grizzlies, Houston, Kings, Lakers, Raptors get a break, Bulls get a break. But then after that, you have the Cavaliers, Bucks, Celtics, Timberwolves, Rockets, Bucks, Celtics, Knicks, Warriors, Thunder, Spurs, Kings. That's how they close out their schedule. That's crazy. So I think it's safe to say that the Suns are not going to make the playoffs. And even if they miraculously do just catch on fire in the play-in settings and make the postseason, it more than likely will be in the 8th seed where they match up against a historically great OKC team, get bounced out in the first round, which is tragic and something that the front office out in Phoenix was attempting to avoid. And by doing so, they were trying to move Bradley Beal at the deadline. But unfortunately, Bradley Beal is basically the general manager out in Phoenix because he has a no trade clause that he has to waive for them to move him. And he wasn't willing to waive it really for any of the suitors that were desperate enough to receive him. And because of Bradley Beal's unwillingness to waive his no trade clause, it then forced Phoenix to kind of pivot to their next and really only other suitable piece to trade, and that was Kevin Durant. They desperately tried to move KD without telling him and having him land playing for the Golden State Warriors. But then once Wynn kind of got out and KD figured out, like, oh my God, you're trying to trade me without letting me know, and it's going to be to the Warriors? Let me go ahead and put a stop to it and let everybody know I don't want to go to the Warriors. And when my contract expires because he only has 1 year left, I'm not going to sign an extension, which then made the entire trade go sour. So now you have an organization that has been underwhelming and tried to make several changes, not only in the offseason with the addition of Tyus Jones, a new head coach, but then tried to make significant changes at the deadline as well, which all have fallen apart. And the Suns effectively, they don't have any more options to make any improvements to this roster, at least significant ones. The Suns are basically at a dead end. They took a gamble on this team, rolled the dice, and it just hasn't panned out for them whatsoever. But if you want a better chance at trying to win big, try out today's sponsors, DraftKings Pick 6. Today's video is brought to you by DraftKings Pick 6. Now, I know for a fact we are all aware we're past the halfway point of the NBA season. NFL season is out of the way. Trade deadline is come and gone, which means the juicy part of the NBA season is here. And for all my people out there that love their daily fantasy, DraftKings has you covered with DraftKings Pick 6. All new customers who play $5 will get $50 in Pick 6 credit, and the setup is very simple. All you have to do is download the app, create an account with your information, use my promo code LOWPOST, and then from there, select 2 players and then decide if they're going to have over or under on specific stats. For example, Luka just got traded to the Lakers. Looked like he might have a couple of revenge games, especially against the Dallas Mavericks. So you might want to go over on his points. Or Cade is having a really good year this season. You might want to go over on his assists as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and sign up with my code LOWPOST only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. I know. King of the ad transitions. Nevertheless, because Kevin Durant is in a situation now where he's frustrated, it's been reported over and over again that the locker room is toxic, it is inevitable that he's going to demand a trade in the offseason to kind of get him shipped off to somewhere else. And then, of course, this has kind of just led a bunch of people in the community to make videos kind of reporting on where exactly some of his suitors are going to be. Now, originally, I wasn't going to make this video because I feel like this whole story has been overreported all throughout this week. Understandably so. Big story, big name being traded. Everybody loves these type of videos. However, I deem it necessary to make this video because this video is part of the reason why I made this channel, and that's because when we as an NBA community get wind of a trade happening, we tend to make these trades that really don't make sense. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm this general manager, big brain mind, I know everything, because I don't, because I mean, Luka Doncic got traded and no one really expected that. However, I do believe there's a part of the conversation that always gets lost when we're trying to put player A on team B and what type of trades are going to make sense. We always get caught up in the fan fiction instead of concerning ourselves with the logistics behind the trade. So what do I mean by this? When it comes to trading Kevin Durant, there's 4 teams that a lot of people are reporting on right now that he potentially could be traded to during the summer. The 4 teams that a lot of people are talking about being interested are Oklahoma City Thunder, Houston Rockets, the Miami Heat, and the team that sneaky could be in this conversation, the Minnesota Timberwolves. In theory, a lot of these teams make a lot of sense, right? KD to OKC, really great story, back to the team that he started his career with, and also OKC may need to upgrade offensively depending on what the postseason has them enduring, and also they have a lot of draft picks. However, it's not that easy, right? OKC is in a situation to where they are financially structured in a way where it'll be very difficult to commit to Kevin Durant. KD's making like $50+ million next year, and he's on an expiring contract. So if you are the Oklahoma City Thunder, you would effectively have to trade Isaiah Hartenstein, Lou Dort, and maybe even like Caruso or Isaiah Joe just to get KD on the team, which you could certainly argue would make sense. However, I'm pretty sure he's also going to look for a contract extension, which then kind of disrupts the structure of all of the players on the payroll right now, because the way that the Thunder have their payroll situated, they effectively have it to where they have all the space in the world to give Chet and J-Dub the contract that they're on pace to receive in another year or two. And so bringing KD to this team and having him on a roster could potentially disrupt that. Now, Houston is slightly different. They do have much larger contracts in both Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, 2 players that are not a part of the bigger picture. You get an instant upgrade by trading 2 players that you inevitably were going to trade anyway. And then you also have not only a bunch of draft capital, but in particular, the Phoenix Suns draft picks that you got from the Brooklyn Nets during the offseason. I believe a lot of people feel like that's the direction they were trying to move in anyway. However, if you are Houston, and the same thing can be said about OKC as well, if you're going to get to the point where you're willing to move draft capital for KD, that seems a bit extreme for someone that's only going to give you another 2 to 3 year window of trying to compete at a very high level. There's no need to leverage yourself to rush yourself into this championship window that the rest of your roster may not be properly prepared for, especially Houston. But moreover, and probably more importantly, the day in which Kevin Durant demands a trade and you start to look at some of the returns that KD is going to yield from some of these teams, because even when you go to like Miami, it's going to be Andrew Wiggins and Terry Rozier maybe, and then out in Minnesota is going to be Julius Randle and Mike Conley on expiring contracts. Like those type of returns, if you give that to Phoenix, you know what's going to happen immediately? That's going to be the same day that Devin Booker also goes to general manager and he demands a trade, because he's like, well, now there's no need for me to compete because this is not a roster that is going to be able to compete at a high level whatsoever, so I want out as well. And so when that day finally comes, if you are a team like a Houston Rockets, like an Oklahoma City Thunder, if you want to expedite some of the process, going after a younger player and Devin Booker may make more sense, especially if you're going to leverage some of your draft picks. And that's not even me just theorizing this. That's something that has also been reported a few times with several people over, Twitter and et cetera, right? So that doesn't really make any sense. Then if you're Miami, sure, the idea of upgrading from Wiggins to Kevin Durant and getting off that bad Terry Rozier deal, that makes sense. But if you're Miami, you just told Jimmy Butler no to giving him a contract extension because of his age. They did the same thing to Shaq, same thing to Alonzo Mourning, and they even did the same thing to Dwayne Wade. So I have a hard time believing that they're going to be desperate enough to give a contract extension to Kevin Durant. So that doesn't make any sense. But if you're Minnesota, the whole reason why you traded Karl-Anthony Towns is because you didn't want to continue to be repeat offenders in the second tax apron, right? You moved off of Towns in his contract where Cat is making relatively similar money to KD. You moved off of him because you knew that Naz Reid and Nikhil, those contracts are coming up and you have to extend them. And it would be way too much money to extend both of them while also paying Towns. So you decided to just lose Towns, get some more financial flexibility, and move in that direction. And so the Wolves making that commitment during the offseason and then turning around saying, you know what, who cares? We're just going to go back in that direction for KD. Sure, you can argue it would make sense because KD is KD. Like, Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant and that's Karl-Anthony Towns. But I kind of just feel like, again, you are doing that to leverage yourself for very, very short-term success that you have to capitalize. And I just don't think that Minnesota is that desperate, which is why the whole situation with what was going on with the Golden State Warriors made a lot of sense, because the Warriors were desperate. They probably didn't mind going into second tax apron and spending a lot of money and over leveraging themselves to get someone like Kevin Durant to try to maximize another 2 to 3 years beyond this season, right? So that all that makes sense for them. I don't think it really makes sense for Minnesota. I don't think it makes sense for Miami, and I certainly don't believe it makes sense for both OKC and Houston when they have a runway that's probably going to extend for 10 years. It then kind of adjusts the question of who is that team that is in a situation where they have draft capital and more than likely willing to move it. They're desperate enough to go after Kevin Durant, knowing that it's only a 2 to 3 year window, but also appealing enough for Kevin Durant to sign another extension to end his career on that team. And it's the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas is that team. As crazy as it may sound, Dallas is the team that should go for Kevin Durant. And for those who actually follow me on Twitter, you know that I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I had this epiphany in my mind, like, oh my God, KD to Dallas actually makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And what's even crazier is I later found out that there were actual reports, and it's crazy to me that no one's even talking about this right now, understandably so. Dallas is going through a whirlwind of a bunch of other news, but it's not enough people talking about the fact that Dallas was aggressively trying to go for Kevin Durant at the deadline. They were already trying to make this team, and again, if that was their whole reasoning and premise of trading Luka Doncic in an attempt to maximize this 2 to 3 year window that they believe that they have, I'm not saying that I would do it because it's very ambitious, but it's a very interesting conversation. Now, who exactly would they trade? Well, in this transaction, PJ Washington would have to be gone, and so would Daniel Gafford. Klay Thompson would also have to be gone. At this point, he's certainly disposable, looking at the trajectory of Max Christie, because he's playing amazing. And then you would have this year's draft pick from Dallas. You would have a pick swap in 2026. You would have the Lakers 2029 pick, and then you would also have the Mavericks either 2030 or 2031 pick as well that you can throw in there. And if you're the Mavericks, you're not like OKC and Houston, where you may be a little resistant to throwing a bunch of draft capital out there for Kevin Durant, who only is going to be great for another 2 to 3 years, right? You're not at that position of desperation where you have to over leverage yourself for a 2 to 3 year window. But right now, Dallas is in a situation where they would over leverage themselves for a 2 to 3 year window to capitalize on it. And if you look at the roster that they would have after this deal is done, is actually very, very impressive. They would have a lineup of Kyrie Irving, Max Christie, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and Derek Lively. Coming off the bench, Najee Marshall, Dwight Powell, Jaden Hardy. And then at that point, you would just sign a veteran or two to kind of fill out the rest of the rotation. And that rotation of 6-7 players would be just as good as really anybody else in the NBA. In my opinion, that actually makes the most sense. And in return, if you're Phoenix, you're probably asking, well, why would Phoenix receive all that? That right there ain't nothing. They're not going to compete, so they're still going to move over Devin Booker. Yeah, they are. Like, I don't know. I'm letting everybody know right now. All my Phoenix fans, when Kevin Durant gets traded, Devin Booker is next. It's only a matter of time. There's nothing that they can do. They are at a dead end. They traded their way into a dead end when they traded for Kevin Durant, moved off of draft capital, and then traded for Bradley Beal. They have no other choice but to blow it up and get as much draft capital as possible in return. That's probably the reason why Houston traded for their draft picks out in Brooklyn, because they knew for a fact they would have the leverage to say, hey, you want your draft picks back? Okay, give us Devin Booker. Sorry for Phoenix fans. I don't know if maybe some Phoenix fans haven't woken up yet, but that is the inevitable. And so now when you put yourself in a situation, if you are Phoenix, the best thing for you to do is not only to get as much draft capital as possible, but also to get as many movable contracts as possible as well to get even more assets in return. Julius Randle ain't yielding you nothing in return. Mike Conley ain't getting you nothing either. That Terry Rozier contract ain't getting you nothing. Fred VanVleet on an expiring that ain't getting you nothing. Lou Dort, Isaiah Hartenstein, that is going to give you something out there in the market. But PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, that's going to give you even more return when you decide to trade them as well to get as much draft capital in return. So in my opinion, if I am Kevin Durant and if I want to really salvage this in my career on a high note, I would really try to find a way to force myself on Dallas. Tell every other team, hey, next year is my last year under contract, because effectively KD also has a lot to say so on where he wants to go. He can tell every team in the NBA, I'm not signing a contract extension with you. These are the only teams that I'm willing to sign a contract extension for. And Dallas makes a lot of sense, because that would immediately turn them into not just title contenders. That right there would be the most talented roster in the NBA, and I don't even think it'll be close. That would be a team that would serve the purpose of thrusting Dallas into a title contending situation, also provide Kevin Durant in the latter part of his career on a team that can actually contend for a championship, while also providing Phoenix with ample amount of draft capital if they're willing to do so, as well as flexible contracts and movable players that would also yield some more return as well in further deals that they can make down the line. That's what I would do. And I say that as a Laker fan. I mean, if Dallas pulls that off, I don't know. That sounds kind of interesting to me. I'll be honest with you. So that team is good enough for them to win. I'm actually being very serious. In my opinion, that's the most interesting aspect of it. Nico Harrison, cut me my check. I'm saving your career, potentially even your life, the way they talking out there in Dallas. Trying to save you, my brother, because I think that should be the plan that you should be rolling out to everybody and letting them know, like, hey, this is what we're going to do during the offseason. They effectively tried to do it during this deadline, but this is what you're trying to do. So, but yo, let me know y'all thoughts in the comment section below. Where do you think KD is going to go? What can Phoenix do to save this? And am I tripping with my whole Dallas Mavericks theory? Because I do think that is very, very real. Also, if you missed my last video, click like right here. I still talk about the Dallas Mavericks because that trade was crazy. It's getting even worse. Make sure you go check that video out. But if not, until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.